You're watching a US election special on BBC News. I'm Laura Trevelyan. A divided America becomes even more divided. In a blow to President Trump, Democrats capture the House of Representatives for the first time in 8 years.
Today is more than about Democrats and Republicans. It's about restoring the Constitution's checks and balances to the Trump administration.
But Republicans gain ground in the Senate, with a number of Democrats losing their seats.
I'm Lucy Hockings here in London. President Trump calls the results a tremendous success.
Just not chill.
What does this mean for his agenda?
The president is going to continue doing exactly what he came to Washington to do.
An election of first, 2 Muslim women and the first Native American women will join Congress.
Hello from Capitol Hill, where the 2 chambers of Congress right behind me will be under very different leadership for at least the next 2 years. Americans are waking up to divided government. The House of Representatives is now back in Democrat hands after suburban voters and women powered them to victory in the midterm elections, though. In the Senate, it is a very different story. Already held by Republicans, it's now redder still after the party managed to pick up seats. This has prompted President Trump to claim it's all been a tremendous success. In reality, it's a split result that could be a recipe for gridlock here in Washington. So here are the details about what happened in the House of Representatives. As you can see, the Democrats overturning the Republican majority and winning a clear victory, 219 Democratic seats to 194 Republicans so far. But in the upper house, the Senate, such a different tale. The Republicans have extended their majority, with a number of Democrats losing their seats, 45 Democrats to 51 Republicans. So for the very latest, let's bring in my colleague Chris Buckler, who's also here in Washington. So Chris, do you think that Democrats, now they've got the power of subpoena, now they're in the majority in the House of Representatives, how are they going to use that?
I think there's no doubt that Democrats will now see themselves as being in a position to keep a watch, to keep a check on President Trump in a way that they've not been able to for some time. If you take a look at the way Congress has been working, it's been controlled by Republicans. It has made Donald Trump's life relatively easy. Although he has fought with some of his own party, there is no doubt that he's been able to push forward his agenda, to really try and get the legislation that he feels is important through Congress and through both chambers of it. But now, all of a sudden, things have changed. Not only did Democrats now have the power in order to try and stop and block legislation, they also have the power to launch investigations and inquiries. It means they can look into things that Donald Trump might not want them to look into. For example, his taxes. He might want to look into, for example, questions of conflict of interests. They may also want to look into allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. All of those things now come into the Democrats' hands, and for them, that is a major victory.
Absolutely doubled down on that controversial immigration message. It seems to have helped him in the Senate, but really hurt him in the House, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it does give you this idea that there are many different races taking place in this midterm elections. It's very much about trying to work out exactly what works in what area. And some Republicans have been nervous, particularly where contests have been tight, about the kind of aggressive rhetoric that Donald Trump has been using, the kind of words and language he's used to try and get his message across. Of course, he will believe that those messages about immigration, along with messages about the economy, have been effective. And certainly when you take a look at where Donald Trump has been campaigning, where he has held rallies over the last number of months, remember something like 30 in the past 2 months alone, he will say that he has made a real difference. And he focused on Senate races, and that is where really Republicans have had their success. This was an evening when Democrats finally had a reason to celebrate. With female candidates at the forefront of their success, they won a majority in the House of Representatives. A victory that will place limits on Donald Trump's presidential power.
Today is more than about Democrats and Republicans. It's about restoring the Constitution's checks and balances to the Trump administration.
But Republicans held their ground in the Senate.
God bless Texas!
Ted Cruz among those to hang on to a seat in Texas despite a fierce challenge. And Marsha Blackburn won in Tennessee after a bitter campaign that cost tens of millions of dollars.
Democrats take House.
It gave an opportunity for both sides to claim victory.
This is it. The Democrats have taken control of half of one of the three branches of government. All the GOP has is the other half of Congress, the Supreme Court, and a president who does whatever he wants. So far, tonight's feeling is, yes. All yes.
For America, it was a midterm election unlike any other. A vote that was seen as a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency, and one that led to an exceptionally high turnout. The president flew into state after state, holding 30 rallies in the last 2 months alone, and putting himself at the centre of tight Senate races.
Thank you very much, Missouri. It is great to be in Indiana. Hello, Houston. Wow, look at that crowd. Oh, do we love Nashville. Get out in 2018 because you're voting for me.
That personal involvement seems to have made a difference.
Candidates that have embraced the president, embraced his policies, and that he's gone in and campaigned for and worked hard for, we're seeing that pay off tonight.
On Twitter, Donald Trump called the results a tremendous success. And there will be relief inside the White House that Republicans have held on to the Senate. But Democrats taking the House of Representatives will cause problems for the president. They'll be able to block legislation and frustrate some of his more contentious plans. Congress, just like America, is now divided. Political power split between the two chambers, and the parties every bit as far apart. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Washington.
So what's been the reaction from the White House to all of this? Well, the president has been admiringly retweeting commentary saying that he is the magic man. I'm sure we'll hear from him more shortly. But when she spoke to reporters, the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders acknowledged the loss of the House, but said retaining control of the Senate and adding seats made it a big victory for the president.
We feel good. It's been a good night for the president up until this point. The Senate race in Indiana, a huge moment for the president, somebody he did an event for just yesterday. Obviously, candidates that have embraced the president, embraced his policies, and that he's gone in and campaigned for and worked hard for, we're seeing that pay off tonight. Marsha Blackburn, Andy Barr, Mike Braun in Indiana. So certainly a good place, but still a very long night to go. The president is going to continue doing exactly what he came to Washington to do, and he can do that whether Democrats have control of the House or not. The question is whether Democrats actually want to come to Washington and do the job that they were elected to do and actually solve real problems.
Sarah Sanders there. Well, Kellyanne Conway, counsellor and spokesperson for the president, also spoke to reporters. She said Mr. Trump was in a buoyant mood, but she was asked whether he now feared being impeached.
Democrats are talking.
We're not really talking about it. He said yesterday they'll do what they want to do and he'll do what he needs to do. I don't know that there will be much of an appetite, Kristen, all across this country in some of these Democratic districts among the constituents for their members to be spending all of their time, or even most of their time, or a fraction of their time, investigating, instigating, trying to impeach and subpoena people. That's a decision they'll need to make, but you have to really give the voters what they want. And as far as I can tell, there aren't many voters out there who say, you know, I'm going to give you an affirmative vote today because you've promised to investigate everybody or impeach the president. There seems to be no little appetite for that. In fact, I've hardly heard the words Russian collusion all night, and I think there's something to that. They're talking about the economy, they're talking about healthcare, they're talking about immigration, they certainly are talking about national security around the world.
And that was Kellyanne Conway there, counsellor to the president. So this morning, Lucy, Americans waking up to a very divided America, divided along lines of race, along lines of class, along lines of geography. But the one thing that has changed overnight, Democrats now have that crucial power of subpoena, the power to call witnesses, papers, persons. They have the power to make life very difficult for the president, but also to work with him if they wish. We will see if the two sides want to get along, Lucy.
Indeed, it was interesting to hear you and Chris discussing that, Laura, whether or not we'll see the president reach across the aisle. But tell us what you think the Democrats are feeling right now in terms of their advantage in the House and how they can possibly use that advantage.
Well, they're definitely feeling relieved that they won the House, because early in the night they were worrying that it would be a narrow Republican hold, which would have been a complete catastrophe for them. What they can do is try to work with the president on infrastructure, for example. They can try to work with him to bring down the prices of prescription drugs. That's definitely common ground. But also, they can try and subpoena his tax returns. They can try and exercise more oversight over the Russia investigation. They have lots of questions they want to ask about Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and what the Democrats see as many conflicts between his business dealings and his role as a foreign policy supremo. The Trump family is very much going to come under the spotlight. Everything from Ivanka Trump's trademarks in China to exactly what Don Jr. was doing when he chatted with the Russians in Trump Tower in June of 2016. So you're going to expect to see an awful lot of that, but Democrats have to be careful not to overreach themselves, of course, because the president likes nothing more than an enemy to run against, and he can make Democrats the enemy as he looks firmly towards 2020 and what he hopes will be his re-election. He's been known to say to friends he doesn't want to be a loser, he doesn't want to be a one-term president. Maybe the Democrats give him the perfect trampoline to bounce back into the White House.
Laura, there's been so much talk about the polarisation in America and how divided the country is and what they're waking up to this morning. What about the positives from this election, though, that this was really democracy at work when we saw all of those lines of people queuing to vote, young people coming out to vote, the high turnout, and now, of course, more women who will be going to work in the building behind you, too?
That's right, Lucy. There will probably be over 100 women who are members of the House of Representatives. There are 435 members in total. The House of Representatives is elected every 2 years. It's supposed to be responsive to popular opinion. That was how the founding fathers set it up. The Senate, where there are 100 seats, 2 for every state, that's supposed to be more deliberative, but the House really has been responsive to the popular mood. What's happened is there's been a rejection of President Trump, particularly